One of my favorite topics, training your manager and building trust. Yeah, training your manager. I love this conversation when I get a new manager. I always have it usually within the first day or two. There'll be an opportunity where I can look at my manager and go, all right, how long is it going to take for me to train you? And I always get a funny look like, what do you mean train me? I'm your manager. I'm supposed to train you. And it's always a great icebreaker because when I talk about training the manager, it's really an important aspect of building an employee manager trust. And we'll start with, as an employee, building trust with your manager. And then later on, I'll talk a little bit about manager building trust with an employee. So I'm going to frame this in terms of your career. And in terms of the career, building a certain kind of trust with your manager is, in my view, paramount for success. And that's why I love this topic so much. So if you look at why there are certain effects that managers use or certain things that they do to you as an employee, let's throw out a few terms here or just a few feelings. I've heard this in, gosh, so many mentoring sessions with from mentees. Well, my manager is very micromanaging. They don't trust my decisions. They ask me tons of questions. They don't seem to ever leave me alone. Like they always want to know what I'm doing. Okay, so I don't know if any of you have heard that before. I know I have many times. But what I would say is, okay, let's unpack that a little bit. Those are behaviors. But why is your manager exhibiting those behaviors, at least the way you're perceiving them? And I would say, like my experience is, it's from a lack of trust. And I'm not going to say that's a malicious thing, but if you think about starting in an organization with a new manager and a clean slate, as an employee, I have to recognize that every action I take and every positive or negative thing that I do is a reflection on my manager and the larger team. So what's the natural reaction of not being able to trust a new employee? Well, they want to know more, right? Like they want to go figure out, like, how do you think? How do you work? Like, why'd you make that decision? What do you consider? And I would say that, and there's, I'll go back to the saying I have, I use this a lot, is if I don't know if there's any Lord of the Ring fans, but if you are, and you remember the scene where Saruman's got his hand over the crystal ball and he's like trying to talk with Sauron. And I had a saying that says, look, if I had a crystal ball in front of me, I'd wave my hands over it and it would have an out of order sign on it because I can't read minds. So that's like, as from a manager, I've used that saying a lot. But as an employee, if you think about the position your manager's in and you put yourself in their heads, maybe some of those actions might seem understood. I won't say that we like them, but we can understand why they would do that. Because remember, especially as you get more senior and your career grows, the impacts of what you can do can be far greater, positively or negatively. So what I would say is that there's only one behavior that you can control, and that's your own. And I believe that for myself. So I believe it's incumbent upon me as an employee to train my manager. Now, okay, tactically, what does that mean? It means that when I start working for a new manager, I have to have them trust me. And I do that by giving them insights on how I make decisions, how I analyze data. What do I consider in terms of pros and cons? Have I looked at options and opportunities? And so usually when I start with a new manager, I end up writing emails that are like really long because I start off with, here's the summary. Here's my recommendation. Here are the options. Here are the pros and cons. These are the things I considered. And if you think about building trust, it's an activity that happens over time. So the more you do that with your manager, the more insights you provided them in training them on how you think. The natural reaction to that is if they have an issue with anything in there, they will ask a question. And if they ask a question for clarity on this issue or that issue or this kind of information, well, now you've gained insights on what they need to trust you. So it's kind of like a learning process initially. And I use the same formula with every manager. And I like to think you get better with every manager about how you present it. Because as you build the trust in your manager with them trusting how you think, they will trust you to make more decisions autonomously. They will empower more. They will give you more scope and work because they don't have to worry about you. And you'll probably talk with them less because they'll know over time how you think and you considered all the right actions and sounds reasonable. So my emails end up getting shorter. And then because they don't need to see as much of that supporting detail because they learn over time that I'm considering it. So the net effect of building that trust as an employee, training your manager, which is an activity you can control, is extremely powerful in growing your career because as you do it better and better, you will find naturally that your scope will grow and grow because your ability to execute autonomously has been accepted in trust. And that trust is built over time. So like any new employee coming in, I expect a lot of questions from my manager because they don't understand how I think. They don't understand what I'm considering. They don't understand what data I use to make that decision or what are the pros and cons that I weigh in on. So I beat it to them. And that's like one tactic I use, but it just highlights the importance of what the individual can do, the employee, to train your manager to build trust. And that trust is really, in my personal case, is what's really helped me gain more scope because once they know I can handle a certain thing, they know how I think, and they are also looking for other opportunities to leverage that in other areas. And so it can kind of snowball over time because you get more freedom then because they don't have to ask all the questions. They don't worry about what decisions you're making, and they can spend their time in other areas as well. So paying attention to the kinds of questions that your manager asks you as you're going through these kinds of processes helps you understand what's important to them in terms of building like the trust in the details of what it is that you consider. And I'll flip it over to managers now. And managers need to learn some new tools as well, because I'm going to spend a moment here on a controversial topic, and that's about being in the office. And I've read a lot of reports, and there's a lot of surveys and in October of 2022 that you can read where it says a higher percentage of employees don't want to work in the office and higher percentage of managers want their people to be in the office. And when I read some of the material, and this isn't universal, but I think it's some of a general statement I feel comfortable saying, is that managers and companies are worried about productivity. Now, if you think about productivity and being in the office, how are those two aligned and why? Like, why does that statement kind of make sense or not? And when I unpacked it a little bit in my own head, I personally believe that having to be in the office is kind of a management crutch. I know it's controversial, but if you think about what I talked about earlier in the engagement process, where you can swing by and say, hey, is that report going to be done? Or, hey, do you need any help with that? Or, oh, let's get in a conference room and we'll just hammer it out. Well, that tool, while it's not the only tool to deal with that, is a tool that is no longer there for many managers. Like most managers have not had the opportunity to work in a remote first world where you had the ability to do that and pull people in. And the reason I say it's a crutch is because I believe it's a result, that feeling is a result of not having developed core scoping, deliverable, negotiation skill set with your employees, where you negotiate a well-known deliverable or task requirement on a specific timetable in a way that reduces risks so they can hit the schedule. Because if you have that, and I think I've talked to other remote managers who I think are a little bit more used to doing this, if you have that, then you don't really care where they're at and what they're doing. And as long as they get it done at the quality level of the bar that was set with all the right things scoped out, then it shouldn't really matter. And you'll notice a lot of remote teams probably have experiences to leverage there, because I think in certain cases, productivity in a remote first world if you have really good management skills, there can go up, because now people can do work on any timetable that meets that requirement without having to have that oversight of building this trust of delivery. Now, again, it's not going to work in every case, and that's kind of a broad generality. But as we talk about general feelings on the situation, again, we talk about the fact that we've still been successful as companies in this environment, but the stressors are changing and what we're seeing is changing. And this is another tool area where I say building the trust, not only as an employee with your manager and training them on how you think and how you make decisions and how you get work, and then obviously executing and getting the work done on the schedule that you say you're going to is very important. But as a manager now, using some, I'll say, more highly refined tools in deliverable and success expectations that require less, let's just say, direct involvement, is going to be key the other way. So you don't want to have an employee come to you and give you what you asked for as a manager, but you realize it wasn't exactly what you wanted. And so that's where I find that doing more work up front as a manager to make sure that those definitions and the success criteria are clear are more important. And, we have OKRs and KPIs, but again, it comes down to is that understanding between both employee and manager in sync, where you can trust that what you spec'd out together in the delivery timeframe is going to meet the expectation. And so I think that there's opportunity on both sides to build this trust with utilizing some of these newer or changed tool sets that we need to go use in a remote first environment, where we can improve both not only from building trust that helps you grow your scope and career, but also how we can do that through delivering the organizational goals and requirements.